On behalf of the North Dakota Department of Transportation, the City of Fargo, and the Federal Highway Administration, welcome and thank you for taking time today to learn about this Main Avenue project in Fargo, North Dakota. My name is Matt Kinsella, Project Manager with Apex Engineering Group, the lead engineering consultant on this project. Presenting with me today is Jake Nordic from SRF Consulting Group, our partner on the consulting team. In addition to NDDOT and the City of Fargo, other agency partners on this project include the Federal Highway Administration and the Fargo-Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Governments, or MetroCog. Other sub-consultants assisting us on the project team include Flint Group with public involvement, Braun Intertech with environmental site assessment, and Juniper with cultural resource surveys. Our project area involves a 1-mile stretch of Main Avenue, or US Highway 10, in Fargo between 25th Street and University Drive, shown in light blue on this project map. The recent Main Avenue reconstruction project that was done in downtown Fargo to the east of this project is shown in purple on the map. There are several different lane configurations on the surrounding Main Avenue corridor. West of our project, from 45th Street to 25th Street, the lane configuration is 6 lanes with dedicated left turn lanes. East of our project, from University Drive to 2nd Street, the lane configuration varies from a 5-lane section to a 4-lane section and ultimately to a 3-lane section as you approach the roundabout at 2nd Street. Another unique aspect of this corridor is the narrow right-of-way that exists between 17th Street and University Drive. There is only 60 feet of right-of-way available within that segment. And as the photo shows, sometimes there are buildings with the faces built right up to that 60-foot line, constraining the ability to make improvements within that area. The purpose and need for the project include replacing the aging corridor infrastructure, both pavement and utilities, improving the pedestrian environment and upgrading the ADA facilities, closing or consolidating access points to address access management, and finally, supporting local and regional mobility. The photo on the lower left shows an example of the pedestrian and sidewalk issues that exist on the current corridor, while the photo on the lower right shows an example of accesses that are spaced too closely together. As part of the project development process, the first step that this project goes through is what is called the NEPA process, standing for the National Environmental Policy Act. This is a process that is required for federal actions in order to study and disclose any environmental effects prior to making decisions and moving on to design and construction phases. There are 3 classes of action for the NEPA process. Class 1 environmental impact statement is the most complex action and is used when there is expected significant impacts on the project. Class 2 categorical exclusion is the least complex action, used when there are not significant impacts expected. Class 3 environmental assessment is used if it is unclear if the impacts will be significant or not significant. We started this Main Avenue project in November 2021 as a Class 2 categorical exclusion, the least complex of the actions. After a year of study, alternative development, and discussion with our project review committee, we determined in late 2022 that we should elevate this project to a Class 3 environmental assessment action in order to study the impacts further to determine if they would be significant or not significant. We kicked off the EA process in February 2023 with FHWA and North Dakota DOT as joint lead agencies and the City of Fargo as a participating agency. The proposed alternatives were studied for potential impacts across a number of environmental categories. After review with the project team, the EA was ultimately signed by FHWA in late October and released for public inspection on November 1st. That public inspection includes a 30-day review period which will end on December 1st, of which this public hearing is a part of. This project timeline shows the anticipated project schedule through design and construction, and where we currently are at in the process, near the end of the preliminary design and environmental clearance phase, as shown by the blue triangle. The 2024 through 2027 dates shown on this schedule are tentative and subject to revision. Before alternative development could occur for this project, we completed a traffic analysis which included traffic forecasts out to the 2020-45 design year. As shown on the graph, one of the first things that was needed to do was to compare collected traffic counts in 2021 with previously collected data shown in the blue dots and orange dashed line here. As shown, previous counts and forecasts expected the volumes in 2021 to be in this range. However, the collected volumes were actually about 5,000 vehicles per day less in this range here shown in the gray dot. The project team reviewed this data and discussed different forecast methodologies, ultimately landing on a methodology that was between those two, the expected projection and the observed volumes, shown in this yellow dot, which was then extrapolated out on the green line to a 2045 forecast volume shown here. The traffic analysis resulted in the following key findings. Current capacity is adequate for 2045 traffic. No expansion of through lane capacity is needed on this corridor. In addition, reduced lanes between 18th Street and University Drive, while maintaining the existing capacity between 25th Street and 18th Street, provided acceptable level of service, or LOS, in 2045. There was no traffic diversion expected at the daily level by reducing these lanes from 18th Street to University Drive. However, there could be some diversion during peak travel periods, as well as some increased queue lengths. Other key findings from the traffic analysis included that the crash history, while slightly higher than average, was below critical and did not represent immediate safety needs on the corridor. In addition, there was a high number of access points on the corridor, and it is recommended to try to reduce those private access points where possible and improve spacing from the adjacent intersections.
Alternatives for the corridor are developed to meet the purpose and need of the project. Although all the alternatives we will discuss today are unique in their own way, there are similarities amongst the alternatives, which include maintaining a 5-lane section west of 17th Street to 25th Street, ADA compliance and an overall improved pedestrian environment, a continuous center-left turn lane, nearly 8,000 feet of sidewalk replacement on both north and south side of Main Avenue, reducing the westbound traffic lanes to 1 lane east of University Drive to 17th Street, providing access management along both the north and south side of the corridor, and replacement of storm sewer, sanitary sewer, water main, and street lighting. Design criteria was also developed to provide consistency along the corridor, and this includes a 11-foot travel lane, a center left turn lane of 12 feet, minimum 6-foot wide sidewalks, and a minimum 4-foot width stamped colored concrete boulevard, which separates the sidewalk from the roadway. As part of the alternative development process, the Main Avenue corridor was split up into 2 segments. The segment to the west, from 23rd Street to 17th Street, includes a reconstruction of the current 5-lane section. This is consistent for all alternatives and will be the alternative moving forward for this segment. The 17th Street to University Drive segment includes 5 alternatives. Alternative A, a no build. Alternative B, a 5-lane section. Alternative C is a 4-lane section and was broken out into 2 separate alternatives. Alternative C1, which includes building impacts, and alternative C2, which includes no building impacts. Alternative D is a 3-lane section. During the analysis process, alternative B was determined to have significant impacts to the corridor and was removed from further consideration. As part of the evaluation for the environmental assessment and the alternatives carried forward, an additional option to alternative C1 was developed, which included a realignment to reduce the amount of impacts to the adjacent properties. Next, we will go through each of the alternatives in more detail. Options were also developed for improvements at specific locations. This includes option 1, which is a widened sidewalk from 23rd Street to 25th Street on the south side of Main Avenue. Option 2 is a raised median at 17th Street intersection. And option 3 is north curb reconstruction at University Drive. It is also important to note as we go through these alternatives that a selected preferred alternative includes alternative C2, a 4-lane segment with modified design criteria and no building impacts, as well as option 1 and option 3. Alternative A is a no-build alternative. What this means is that there will be no improvements along the corridor and it will remain as is. The segment between 23rd Street and 17th Street will be a reconstruction of the current lane configuration, which is 2 eastbound and westbound lanes and a center turn lane. This is a 5-lane section. This is a preferred alternative to move forward for all alternatives for this west segment, and all improvements will be made within the existing right-of-way. Here is a cross-section of the preferred improvements between 23rd Street and 17th Street. This includes a widened sidewalk of 6 feet, a 4-foot boulevard, and a 5-lane section. For all the alternatives, we will show a visualization which represents what the improvements would look like. For the 23rd Street to 17th Street alternative, you can see that maintains the current 5-lane section with improvements to the pedestrian environment. Alternative C1 is a 4-lane corridor with building impacts between 17th Street and University Drive. The 4-lane segment includes 2 eastbound lanes, 1 westbound lane, and a center left turn lane. The existing right-of-way corridor is 60 feet in width. The needed right-of-way for these improvements is 70 feet. The impacts as a result of this alternative include 7 buildings and right-of-way needs for the widened corridor on 23 properties. Here's a cross-section of alternative C1, which includes the 4 lanes, the desired sidewalk width of 6 feet, and boulevard width of 4 feet, but also shows the impacts it has to buildings along the corridor because of the widened section. Alternative C1 visualization shows that reduction of 1 lane in the westbound direction and the addition of the center turn lane, but it also shows the impacts to the buildings on the corridor as a result of the widened sidewalk and boulevard improvements. Alternative C1 option 4 is the same improvements as alternative C1 with one exception. There is a shift in the roadway alignment to eliminate one of the building impacts on the north side. The alignment shift occurs to the south, which eliminates the impact to the building on the north, but also maintains the full desired sidewalk width and boulevard width of 6 feet and 4 feet. This graphic shows the alignment shift of Main Avenue to the south to remove the impact to the International Market Plaza building. However, it does increase the right-of-way need to the properties to the south. This alignment shift occurs between University Drive and just west of 14th Street South for approximately 700 feet. Alternative C2 is a 4-lane segment with modified design criteria to eliminate the building impacts that were identified in alternative C1. There will be 2 eastbound lanes, 1 westbound lane, and a center left turn lane. The right-of-way need is also reduced to 68 feet because of the modified design criteria, and reduced even further at the location where there are buildings abutting the existing right-of-way. The modified design criteria for alternative C2 include lane width reductions from 11 feet to 10.5 feet, and the center left turn lane width reduction from 12 feet to 11 feet. The sidewalk and boulevard widths will also be modified to the minimum values, only at areas adjacent to the buildings. These reductions include a minimum 5-foot width sidewalk and a minimum 2-foot wide boulevard. The length of these reduced sections for the sidewalk and boulevard only account for approximately 500 feet of the 8,000 feet along the corridor. Again, these are only at the building locations along the building face. And only 6% of all sidewalk will be using this reduced design criteria. The cross-section for alternative C2 shows these design criteria modifications with the lane widths, the through lanes, and the center left turn lane, as well as the boulevard and sidewalk widths adjacent to buildings. Anywhere else where there's not a building will still use the project criteria of a 6-foot walk and a 4-foot boulevard. The alternative C2 visualization shows that 4-lane section with 2 eastbound lanes, 1 westbound lane, and a center turn lane, but also shows those areas where the sidewalk width and boulevard width reductions at the building faces occur, as you can see at the top of the screen. Alternative D is a 3-lane section from 17th Street to University Drive, and it includes 1 eastbound lane, 1 westbound lane, and a center left turn lane. There will be an eastbound lane drop at the intersection of 18th Street, which is also signalized. All improvements with Alternative D with the 3-lane section will be completed within the existing 60-foot right-of-way. Cross-section for Alternative D shows that 3-lane segment. It also shows all improvements being constructed within the existing right-of-way footprint. The sidewalk widths vary from the minimum desired width of 6 feet or greater, depending on the location along the corridor. This widened sidewalk with this alternative provides that maximum pedestrian environment and safety. The Alternative D visualization shows that 3-lane section, as well as the widened sidewalk area, all constructed within the existing right-of-way footprint. Here are some examples from the previously reconstructed Main Avenue project east of our corridor that are representative examples of some of the pedestrian improvements that will be carried forward with our alternatives. The far left picture represents alternative C2 adjacent to those buildings with the reduced design criteria for the sidewalk and boulevard. The other pictures are representative examples of the widened sidewalk and boulevard that will be carried forward as part of the project improvements. As part of all the alternatives, there will be opportunities to provide streetscaping along the corridor, mainly in the boulevards with plantings and trees, as well as providing some separation to adjacent parking lots. Here's a summary of the impacts each of the alternatives have to the properties along the corridor. Alternative C1 and Alternative C1 Option 4 had the greatest number of impacts when it comes to buildings, relocations of businesses, as well as right-of-way needs with the widened corridor. Alternative C2 and Alternative D had no building impacts, no relocations, but do require some right-of-way needs along the corridor with the improvements. Alternative C2 has been selected to move forward as the preferred alternative, and this includes the 4-lane section between 17th Street and University Drive with the modified design criteria to reduce the amount of impacts to adjacent properties. Access management is also an improvement along the corridor that will be made with the alternative. There are approximately 80 driveways adjacent to Main Avenue along this corridor. We have worked closely with business owners, property owners to discuss opportunities to reduce the number of driveways along the corridor. We have confirmed that 24 driveways could be closed with the potential for 7 more that we are currently continuing to discuss with the property owners. That is approximately a 39% reduction of access points along Main Avenue. This will provide safety for the traveling public and for also those going to those businesses. In addition to the alternatives, there are options to consider for incorporation into the corridor improvements. These options can be applied to any of the alternatives. Option 1 is a widened sidewalk from 23rd Street to 25th Street. This widened sidewalk is consistent with the improvements along the project corridor to the east. It also provides some connectivity of other pedestrian facilities adjacent to Main Avenue. Also, improvements at the crossing of the railroad spur line are part of this option. This includes a wider area for wheelchairs and bicyclists to cross the railroad tracks, and it provides a safer crossing with this skewed location. Option 1 has been selected as a preferred alternative to move forward with the project improvements. Option 2 is a raised median at 17th Street. This raised median prohibits left turning movements to and from 17th Street. This acts as a right in, right out type of intersection control. Option 3 is a reconstruction of the north curb line to the west of University Drive. The existing curb line will be pushed further to the south to better delineate the one westbound through lane. This will also provide a wider sidewalk environment on the north side in this location. Option 3 has been selected as a preferred alternative to move forward as part of the project improvements.
Estimated costs for the 4 alternatives are shown in the following table. Column 1 shows the preliminary construction and engineering costs, which are very similar across all alternatives as shown. The differences in the alternative costs are seen in column 2, land acquisition and building impact relocation costs. Alternative C1 and alternative C1 plus option 4 are quite a bit higher than the other alternatives due to the building impacts and business relocations required for those 2 alternatives. This project will be funded by a combination of federal, state, and city funds. The federal share would range from $19.5 to $29.2 million, state share ranging from $2.2 to $3.3 million, and the city share ranging from $10.7 to $11.9 million, depending on the alternative chosen. The city share will be funded by a combination of assessments, city sales tax dollars, and utility funds. The project corridor was reviewed for any encroachments of the right-of-way. 49 encroachments were identified, which consisted mostly of signs and awnings that extended out over the right-of-way. The project team will work with landowners and businesses to determine if these encroachments can be permitted or if they need to be relocated. In addition, we will be working with BNSF regarding a railroad spur crossing near the 23rd Street intersection on the west end of the project, and on 4 BNSF-owned properties on the north side of the corridor, from which right-of-way and easements will be required. This table summarizes some of the key advantages and disadvantages across the four alternatives. Some of the main differences being the two eastbound lanes between 17th Street and University Drive that the C alternatives have, with alternative D only having one eastbound lane, and the building impacts and business relocations required by alternative C1 and alternative C1 plus option 4. The third bullet under the disadvantages for alternative C1 also summarizes the key finding of the environmental justice study, which is that there were disproportionately high or adverse impacts to an environmental justice population due to the building impacts of alternative C1 on the International Market Plaza and Bonjour Fargo buildings. Once the evaluation and documentation of impacts from the alternatives was complete as part of the EA process, the project team worked to develop an evaluation matrix as shown on the following slide. This matrix compared the alternatives to each other across 6 main categories, which are shown on the left. Those categories were also weighted by the project team and the public as to their importance in the scoring, with the larger size text being the highest weighted categories and the smallest text being the lowest. Those weights were then applied to average scores for each category to determine a final weighted score and a total shown on the bottom. As the totals show, alternative C2 and alternative D both scored significantly higher than the other 3 alternatives, including the no-build alternative, with alternative C2 being slightly higher than alternative D. Construction is tentatively planned for 2 construction seasons, 2026 and 2027. The plan for traffic control is to detour through traffic on First Avenue North and construct a few blocks at a time by phasing the project work zone into multiple phases. Business access will be maintained throughout all phases of the project. This approach is very similar to the downtown Main Avenue reconstruction projects that were completed a few years ago. This table shows some current and upcoming milestones that will need to be accomplished to reach the end of the environmental clearance phase on this project. The EA was signed and adopted by FHWA in late October 2023. Released for public inspection in the 30-day comment and review period on November 1st. Public hearing is on November 16th, with the end of the EA 30-day public review and comment period being on December 1st, 2023. After that, the project team will compile all public comment received and summarize it in the final environmental document, which will be submitted to FHWA. FH will then review that document and issue its final determination on whether the environmental process is complete. That determination will either be a finding of no significant impact, or FONSI, or that further environmental analysis is required. If the determination by FHWA is that the environmental clearance process is complete and a finding of no significant impact is determined, the project will move into the final design and right-of-way acquisition phase in 2024 and 2025, with project plans expecting to be bid ready by late summer 2025. The project will then be bid in late 2025 with construction starting in spring 2026. Again, these 2024 to 2027 dates are tentative and subject to change. We want to hear your feedback on the EA and on this project. Written or emailed comments can be provided to me at the addresses shown on the screen. Just a reminder that comments are due by December 1st, 2023. NDDOT would also like you to tell us a little bit about yourself if you are willing. You can complete the optional Title VI Civil Rights Survey and then email or mail the completed form to me at the addresses shown on the screen. Once again, we want to thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. We look forward to hearing your feedback.